Could you set us up maybe by talking a bit about the evolution, the origin of your practice, and how you arrived to this point? We went in chronological order. So the first film in this program, well, we didn't. Sorry, the work in progress was first, extended release. But after that, it was in chronological order. So Luna y Santur was the earliest film in this program, and then it went on from there. Can you talk about, basically how you arrived at the point of making that film?
It's a good question. Also, I want to say thank you to Sarah, the projectionist, for making things look great and sound great. I mean, the work, I'd made work before 2016, and I think that the writer Michael Szynski said that I entered my dirty basement period around 2016. A couple of things happened. I went to graduate school, and my mother died, and that had been sort of an ongoing, slow process that was quite painful. I already had come from I'd was already invested in experimental film and video art, and had studied under people like Peggy Alwesh, Les Levesque, Ed Halter, that sort of that group of the Hudson Valley, and Marie Reagan, and then was sort of in it in New York before moving out to California, and I was I think that the idea of altered states was something that I already enjoyed exploring. And then I had a weird paranormal experience that I don't have to talk about, but I can expand on, but it's a little bit of a side. I'm a bit of a rambler, so
You're welcome to ramble.
I know, but I also, trying to keep it under reins. I can let it loose later. So Luna y Santur, the artist Ben Coonley was doing a show called My First 3D at Microscope Gallery, and he reached out to me asking me for a piece, and I made a short version of that. I was thinking about Ken Jacobs' concept of eternalisms, and I was also thinking about Michael Smith's Secret Horror, and the way that Peggy Alwesh would film both sex scenes and fight scenes, as well as my partner and I had a rough year, and we'd, thankfully salvaged our marriage, and my mother had died, and I had a weird I was having some ghost encounters, which was very bittersweet as a skeptic, but maybe ghosts believe in me. So with all of that, I mounted 2 Bolexes side by side, and I enlisted the people that I credited, but specifically my partner Emma Brenner Mallon and the filmmaker, musician, artist Liana Kaiser. Raji Samir Singh, the filmmaker, also was a ghost, but he kind of got the cut. It didn't work. And I shot it on 2 unsynchronized Bolexes that I then hand processed, and then realized you can't make a wiggle vision movie that way. But I was into what was happening. I'd already, been studying with Charlotte Price and thinking about the roots of cinema, about the phantasmagoria, the idea of ghost photography. And then I expanded this 3-minute thing that I gave to Ben into what we see here. From that, I made a couple other things. I did some live performance projector things. And I made a a piece that I called Failures that I don't really like to talk about because I think it's a failure. And then I had a few abortive projects that I've accumulated a lot of stuff. I've shot a lot, just here and there, even if I'm not specifically thinking about a project.
And you, with the intention of using it all at some point or another.
So something that Peggy taught me that stuck with me was this idea of shooting something and then kind of putting it on the shelf and forgetting about it. And as a result, you gain distance from that. And then when you reapproach it, whenever that is, it's like found footage. You have this distance that lets you maybe see it in a way that you couldn't because you were too close to it. And I've accumulated a lot of stuff, both found footage and shooting. I also had done a workshop with Luther Price, who I met in somewhere between 2015 and 2016. He was an artist, unfortunately passed on, but he had given me some found footage, rolls of 35 millimeter. And he died. I mean, I'd been trying to do something with them, but I didn't know what. And then when he died during 2020, I felt compelled to see that project through, which resulted in the film Inney Corridor, which exists both as a 35 millimeter blow-up as well as a sculptural 16 original.
No, continue, by all means.
I don't want to, like, if there's something that is more interesting that I can talk about.
This is very interesting. I was just gonna circle back to Luni Santor, and I'm curious about the way you conceive of these films and they take shape in your mind, because you described that movie to me as stemming from your wanting to make a narrative about ghosts, a ghost story, which is the last word I would have used to describe any of these films. But so I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about the impulse and how these take shape for you, and particularly if you want, you can start by using that as an example of that film.
Often, I mean, painting often has a framework. I mean, if my obsession with a certain Belgian surrealist hasn't been apparent, no Magritte fans in the audience, I guess. Okay, so there we go. Yeah, Magritte's awesome. I think that at various points in my time, in my arc, I've been drawn to certain images, gestures that can be ambiguous in nature, especially when we trap them in time or manipulate them in time. But I was thinking about Luni Santor as I saw a movie, Céline and Julie Go Boating in Bateau, and I thought I would really love to make a movie about two ladies who have a really great friendship that also happen to be ghosts. And I was thinking about like a two-part thing. Ben Rivers had just come out with the title's very long, but it's like The Two Eyes Are Not Brothers and something another, the sky and I loved it, but I was thinking there would be this split point between where the ghosts exist and then where the women playing the ghosts would go into something else, go out for a ride. And I often have a narrative in mind. I mean, We Don't Talk Like We Used To also was going to be a narrative. And I've written screenplays, and I have, like, there was a whole screenplay and a whole narrative that I had imagined and thought out. But the thing is, I think just the nature of how I exist and express myself, I then cut away at this thing that I've made, this narrative, and I reshape it into something that makes sense to me, that feels appropriate to me. Because, I like to say that I grew up going to the movies with my mother, and she spoke English very well, but sometimes regional dialects were challenging, and I like this idea of making work that is felt viscerally, that transcends language, that doesn't require language or logos to perceive or comprehend.
Out of curiosity, what was the narrative you originally had in mind for We Don't Talk Like We Used to?
So I'm actually still trying to work at this, but it's about the birth deficit in Japan. And there was I mashed 3 projects together. There's a science fiction film that deals with the birth deficit that I was working on. I was also, We Don't Talk Like I Used to, I'd been invited by the artist Tiffany Shaw and to come to the space that she was running with her partner, Andrew, and it was my first time in Hong Kong, and I think that Hong Kong, it's a whole can of worms, but it was sort of a mystic place to me as a person, and also I think a kind of loaded place as a person of Japanese descent. But I remember there was a remark that my parents made about, not like when I was growing up, about, oh, I wish we could have gone to Hong Kong, but like after 1998, like I don't think we should go there. And I never really thought much about it beyond that. I think I'm a very naive person, and so sometimes I just accept something at face value, and it wasn't until later that I began to become kind of curious about that. And so I met various people that were involved with the pro-democracy movement, and I was also thinking about smog because my partner was pregnant, and we just found out that we were pregnant, and I'd gone to Hong Kong, and the AQI index, the air quality index, was like 378 or something, and so it's like cancer, and I thought, like, I'm gonna die, and my child will grow up without a father, and I was thinking about smog and was thinking about capital, because I was also there was a bunch of different ideas that I wanted to do. I was really fascinated by the horse racing industry in Hong Kong, which is like a major funder of most arts and cultural events, I found out, in Hong Kong. There's a museum that was formerly a prison in an area called Tycoon that you could go and like get your photo taken in like the stocks that they would torture people in. And I don't know, I think about like this collision of the present day and the past. I'm not the first person to think about this. Jalal Tawfiq has written about it probably in every book that he's ever written. But this idea of when we perceive a space, we see it both in the present, but then also how it was at a different point in time, and also in a different point in time from that. And then also maybe with an anticipation of what that place will become. And Hong Kong really is that. And as I was working on this, then I realized that, because I was talking with the artist Simon Liu and Tiffany and other people from Hong Kong about like, how can I speak or represent this space with any kind of authority? And they were like, don't worry about it. Like, it's your movie. Just do what seems right. They gave me a lot of trust, and I really wanted to do a good job with that. But then that also brought up then a lot of my own history of traveling, of visiting my motherland, which then brought out footage from Japan that actually I had some undeveloped roles that came out that I was processing at the same time that I was doing this from one of my cousins' weddings, and it felt like there is something that needs to be tied. It's all very processed based, but then finding and figuring out what the structure is as a result.
I have more questions for you, but does anyone in the audience here have anything? If so, feel free to just throw your hand up.
Ask me anything.
Otherwise, I'm glad to keep going. Back there? Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for this program. I wondered, it's interesting to know that we watch things, I guess, nearly chronologically, because I had the sense, as I've seen some of this work before, but not all of it, and I had the sense that the content of the footage maybe became more meaningful to you over time. That the last film, that you're talking about it now, that you felt a sort of responsibility to the representation of this place that you were, in shooting in Hong Kong in the last film that we saw. But the first film that we saw almost feels like an animal lining its cage or something. It has this like glut of material that is I didn't know how important it was to you, the material itself, and I wanted to ask you about that. Maybe specifically in that first film, but then it feels like gradually it becomes more important. And it's not to say that you treat it lightly or something in the first film. I hope this question makes some sense to you.
I think so.
Okay.
Just to clarify, the first film is the most recent.
Yeah.
The first film is the most recent.
Yeah, sorry.
Wow.
Yeah. The
Okay,
first film.
so reverse my question then. How has it gotten less important?
If it has become less important.
Yes.
Well, the first film is also, I should mention, a work in progress. It's the remaining. So I still have material from Luther, as well as something that was happening during tourism studies, as well as with the first film, extended release, which screening a work in progress. Like there's a little bit of a joke in that, because I want to keep showing it as it morphs and changes. I work very obsessively, and it may be, I think when working with found footage in this way of cutting it up, of painting on it, of burying it, of bleaching it, of putting double stick tape down and then setting it on fire because it won't go through the projector properly. I think what I'm drawn toward is this tension between its frailty and, it's also like, it is a brutal thing. I think it's not good to be overly precious with one's footage and material. I think that can make a lesson that Pavel Wojtaszek has taught me is that you have to be very brutal as an editor. If something is not good, like you can't just have a piece of footage because you feel it's special in some way, if that's not actually true, if it's not serving the work. And I felt like handling film as a sculptural material, rather than thinking, I really like this, I really want this to be pristine. I'm not going to do anything with this footage otherwise. And my hope is that this detritus that would have otherwise been tossed out, that would have been thrown away, can then have a new life. I don't know if that makes sense. I'm happy to expand on that as well. But I think I'm giving it a lot of care. Maybe I'm a bit of a sadist, so that might be like a very brutal care toward the film. But I try to pick up every piece that flakes off and repair it whenever it falls apart.
Is there a question there? Yeah? One sec, just wait for the mic, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think so. In relation to the found footage organization of the first film, I guess I was wondering about like the recurrence of the images over and over again. Is the theme and variation as it also is superimposed against the sound? The process of the audio. It's really, I really love that one.
Thank you.
You create the soundtracks for your films as well as the visuals, not only by manipulating the actual film material and creating sound that way, but by using a synthesizer. Can you talk about the way the way your process works in terms of how you develop a soundtrack alongside the, visual magic and destruction?
Two-parter. The quick answer, I could give you the more elaborate answer later. But so with extended release and with Inney Corridor, the sound is coming from the optical track. The image that you're seeing is then passing both through the light and the lens, which projects the image out onto the screen, but then also passes through a bulb that is translating the image, the difference of dark and light, into sound. So, like the recurrent, like the "Oh My Clementine" that you hear, I just found like a really long intact piece from the found footage that I had, and I taped it down, and so and then when it's sort of a sound, that's just sprocket holes that you're hearing.
That was like really excellent creation of that sound.
I mean, I'm cribbing off of Luther Price, or hopefully doing him honor. In terms of my approach to sound, I really love sound. I think, was it David Lynch who said that sound is really what? No, I'm going to butcher this. But I think my general approach is I think it's important to have good sound. You can have a compromise on the image, but without sound, unless it's a purely visual piece, to me, it's about the synthesis between sound and image. I don't know how to identify as a musician. I used to play in a bunch of punk bands and like Brazilian jazz when I was in high school, and then got into synthesizers, building my own synthesizers after college because I felt that my body had sort of atrophied and would be unable to have the virtuosic qualities of my youth. And I got into building my own synthesizers. I think a lot about frequencies and the ways in which we unconsciously respond to frequencies. I don't know if anybody's heard about the hum, which is an acoustic phenomena that afflicts certain seaside areas where low-level hum, it's like infrasonic, it's sub-audible, it's almost felt, and those areas are often blighted by madness and depression. Like, it's just a sound that drives people crazy. I had an interest in binaural beats and neural feedback, and this way that exposure to certain frequencies could induce a kind of state of mind. And I think that, affect, emotion is so easily swayed in moving image as well as in music and sound. But like when horror movies, there'll be like a bah, or there's always like screechy strings. I think that I'm just doing kind of an extension of that. What I feel emotional. I mean, sometimes I just record things and then set them aside and then forget about them and then come back to it. I'll do field recordings periodically. Like, I was burning some boxes of film for when I was humming, or right after I was humming in the last film. It was just, I was burning some film boxes, and I was like, this is a nice sound, I'll record it. So it's case by case. Sometimes I'll be looking at something and then think, this needs sound here. During Looney Sauntour, it was originally silent, and I was trying to figure out, but then there was like an elevator in the room next to where I was watching it, and so I like this idea of, I thought like maybe if I just have like sub-audible things that lightly pop the speakers, that would do something. I am also really, especially in We Don't Talk Like We Used to, I love the idea of granular sound, granular synthesis, which is where you take a small snippet of sound, a small snippet of time, and you sort of stretch it out. Because, I mean, that's like this is like me and my most schmaltzy is like, as a father, like, what wouldn't I love to take this moment of time and just make it last? And that's sort of the sound technique where most of the music is coming from, is me taking these snippets of sound and just repeating it or making it happen over and over again or just ruminating on it.
Repetition in general is an effect you seem to.
I love repetition.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's used with really pronounced effect in the latest film, this scene of the prescription drug PSA. And it's, the thing itself is repeating, but then the image is also repeating with alterations each time. And the sound, of course.
Peter Rohr is a great artist to check out. I'm remembering the name. I'm terrible with names. Great artist to check out if you love repetition. I like the idea of it shouldn't be exactly the same, right, because it never is. Yeah. Time is never like that. You can try to, like, when you meet up with your buddy from high school that you haven't seen in 20 years, and you get together and things are the same, but also you're aware of what is different, what has changed, what kind of can't go back. The dumb answer is I just kept reprinting. I printed a copy using a flashlight of that PSA medication safety footage, and then from that copy I made another copy, and from that copy I made another copy, and I think to me it's really funny, and if I could, I would just make maybe 40 minutes of that. But I'm not going to do that to you. Maybe someday. But I think there's something about revisiting a thing over and over again, and each time, because with repetition you build familiarity, and then when something changes, you notice what's changed. I believe that very strongly, and so much of life is built on the banal, that an interruption of that is staggering. I don't know. Lately I've been thinking and sort of wrestling with the idea of banality, because so much of my life is. But there is, I think, great beauty to be found in that, because it is another form of a thing we take for granted, a thing that we would cast aside. I don't know, I feel like a lot of people have had this revelation. But also being a parent is like a big cliche in of itself, so I feel okay saying it.
Any final thoughts or questions for Josh before we wrap it up? Yeah, I just want to thank you all for coming, and thank you for allowing us to watch these films together.
Thank you.
A special experience.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor. Thank you. Thanks to all of you.